Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It is July 12th, 2018, and we're underway at 7 p.m. First up on our agenda is our invocation, and then we'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance to the American and Texas flags. Tonight, the invocation is going to be handled by our newest council member, Jim Meadows. And so if you would please stand for the invocation and the pledges.
Heavenly Father, please bless this meeting and give us guidance in our decisions and our actions that we will be taking. We ask that you watch over our Helotes staff, especially our public safety and public works people that are putting their lives on the line every day for us. We ask that you spread your protective cover for all those visitors and citizens of Helotes who we encounter with daily. We also ask that you give your guidance and coverage for those people who are serving as our national leaders and also the people in the military that serve every day. Finally, we ask that we always be reminded that of your commandment to love thy neighbor. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Before we move on, I'd like to welcome those of you who are new faces in the crowd. It's always good for council to be able to see people other than playing to an empty house. And so we commend you for coming down here, and hopefully you'll learn something about how this council functions, and we're always looking for input and suggestions. So again, thanks for coming. First up, or next up on our agenda, we have a public hearing, and I'm required to read this, so I'm going to open this public hearing at 7:02. And it is a public hearing to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on the proposed voluntary annexation of approximately 57.531 acres of real property, consisting of the following two tracts of land contiguous to the Brycewood subdivision. First is an approximate 27.502 acre tract of land generally located on Galm Road, San Antonio, Texas 78254, and being more particularly described as BCAD, property ID 236292, CB4450, P-41, ABS 467, and an approximate 30.029 acre tract of land generally located on Galm Road, San Antonio, Texas 78254, and being more particularly described as BCAD property ID 236320, CB4450, P-50, ABS 467, out of P-5C. So now you all know exactly where those pieces of property are. I can say that no one signed up for this public hearing. So nobody signed up?
Nobody signed up. Oh, no, for public hearing.
Okay, and so we can close this public hearing, having done our due duty, at 7:04. Next up, we have citizens to be heard. We have two that have signed up to speak, and so first up, and let me just tell you basically the guidelines for citizens to be heard. You have 3 minutes, and when you get to the podium, please state your name and address, and then we have a countdown clock that should start after you give your address, and then you have 3 minutes to just lay it on the council. First up, we have Judith Hurst. So Judith, step up there, and the microphone should be on. If you need to pull it down closer to you, have at it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. The first duty
of the city
Give
government.
us your name and address.
I'm sorry.
That's
Judith Hurst, 14855 Antonio Drive,
Okay.
Helotes 78023.
Thank you.
First duty of city government is to protect its citizens and provide relief. So I'm here tonight seeking that. The property I'm going to talk about is 14471 Marin Hollow. Prior to 1992, Raul Elizalde bought the property and began dumping either clean fill or construction and debris material. That's prior to 1992. 1992, Mr. Youngblood moved in and noticed that his view was being obstructed by this pile of debris. 2008, Mr. Youngblood came, protested to the city, and he was told that the owner was a nice guy who possibly built cabinets for City Hall under the name of Millennia Cabinets. 2008, I moved in and noticed several dump trucks daily. 2017, I filed a written protest after the rocks appeared in the creek with the boulders. Josh inspected both properties and said that nothing was going on. 2018, I complained to Mr. Schoolcraft, and he said that you were allowed to dump clean fill. I followed Galvan Trucking to the property where they dumped their rock, and then I followed them back to this division called the Gardens, which is near the post office. After Monday's deluge and excess rock building, I followed the truck up onto the property. I took pictures of this 75-foot hill that was giving way and crumbling, and the boulders were lying in the oak trees. What is happening, City Council members, is that the rock is flowing to the left of the property, and it's flowing onto a ravine near Iron Horse, coming through the tributary, I call it a creek, but a tributary, on the Langley property, coming across the street, coming into Marin Hollow, and blocking the ditch, first of all. When the ditch blocks with the boulders and the rock, her house floods, Miss Lauder's house floods. Then it comes onto my property, and it flooded mine and the Cowart property next door. It closed the floodgates, and it caused all the rock to go on the street. Yesterday, Justin comes and bulldozes the rock to the side, but it creates a berm. If there's another rain, we're stuck. Now, I am responsible for clearing my creek, and I can't do it.
Judith, I'm sorry, your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
But please, if you have any information that you'd like to
I
leave,
have the pictures.
leave it with our city secretary, and then we'll take a look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kelly Hurst.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Again, state your name and address, and the time will start after you say your
I'm
address.
used to commissioners' meetings in San Antonio, but my name is Kelly Hurst, 14855 Antonio. I'm excited to be here. I recognize some of you because I wave at you at the parade when you go around the corner there, and I'm concerned about maybe the future of a river parade that we're not ready for. So I'd like to address the property 14855 Antonio as a convergence zone where the water is pooling and being directly on the property. I noticed when I walked yesterday, or this morning, that I have a different issue than the one that she is discussing, which I am aware of. My issue is from Los Reyes Canyon or something. We have a new drainage pattern that's appeared across my pasture that I saw today with grass laying down that I had no idea since 2008, the when it took place. I've never seen that water pattern. I walk through my creek every day. So while I see the changes in the structures and the limestone, the de-channeling of the creek or the re-channeling of it, it indicates the water structure, or the water pressure is changing, and there are some variances in the drainage patterns. The reason I mention this is because I think that before we as citizens and community develop that area, we should have some check on governmental overlay and make sure that there are not any drainage patterns being caused by San Antonio's development, you know, because we're surrounded. So the area that we're in is significant geographically, culturally, historically, and it can handle water. I don't want to say it's similar to Green Hall, but I can say that we have a potential for rechanneling and redevelopment, and I guess a geologist will tell you elevation changes. I'm not sure, but there's a berm across the street from us that she was talking to. I didn't realize it was created by a bulldozer. To me, it looked like it was natural. Every time I walk the creek, I see new rocks. I'm like that. Well, I didn't think much thought of it today. I realized that I might have, as a contingent interest in the property, not a vested interest, I might have a problem in the future. And it is so close to Old Town that you don't know that Old Town might increase by land acquisition later on as an area that you might want to make like a green or something like that. But public safety is my main concern, and my location as the center is my imperative to rush down here and introduce myself to you today. Thank you for allowing me to come down here, and I'll keep myself posted. You're welcome on my behalf to tour the land and see the creek at any time. I offer that. Judy, I'm sure, is agreeable. She's my mom. So we're different styles, but we're still the same. Thank you very much, City Council.
Kelly? Okay, next up on our agenda, we have item number 4, which is classified as old business because it was postponed from our last meeting. I would like to, if there are no objections, suspend the rules and move item 4 to the end of the agenda to follow item 12 so that we can get these other items out of the way before we start discussing that, since we have folks waiting for some of the action. So if no objections to suspending the rules and moving this to the end, then we'll do that, which takes us to the consent agenda, items 5 through 6. For those of you who are not familiar with this type of meeting, a consent agenda is a grouping of items that are put together by staff or myself because they're considered fairly routine city business, and hopefully our objective is to get council to take one motion and one second to approve all of the items in the consent agenda. However, if they have a question that can be answered, we'll address that fairly quickly. If they want it to be discussed, they ask to pull it, and it'll drop down into the regular agenda. So at this time, I'd ask council, are there any questions or requests to pull either items 5 or 6 from the consent agenda? Nothing being heard, we'll ask then for a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 5 and 6.
Mayor, make a motion we approve consent agenda items 5 and 6.
We have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Second from Meadows. No discussion being required. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 5 through 6 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. That takes us to item number 7, which is a presentation to council by David Rodriguez from the Texas Municipal Retirement System, otherwise known as TMRS, which is our retirement program for our employees. He's the senior regional manager, and we will discuss and ask questions appropriately, so welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, Mayor. If you want my address, I live in Kyle, Texas, so I don't know if you need that for the record.
That's okay.
But I'm originally from San Antonio. I'm a graduate of James Madison. You know where that's at? My mom still lives over there by Midnight Rodeo. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
We were discussing, your city secretary and I, a little bit about plan provisions with us, what you have with us in the system, and I'm going to give you a quick overview. I plan not to take very much time, and then talk specifically about your plan that you have here for your employees. Again, if you have any questions for me, ask me, I'll stop, we'll talk about it again. But this basically is just a quick overview of how our system works. And then again, if you have any concerns of what I discuss, stop me along the way and we'll discuss it again. Okay, I don't have a clicker. Are you going to take care of it for me?
Let me know when you're
Next slide, please. I'm going to give you a little quick overview of what we have in participating cities. That number is wrong at the top because I brought in another city just recently. We're about 881 cities right now in the system. We don't have the large cities. They are on their own. Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, Galveston, and El Paso. Our largest city is San Antonio. I have one of my managers here every week retiring employees. We have 10,000 employees with San Antonio. So that is our largest entity we manage. We're right at about 110,000 members, close to 60,000 annuitants, retirees. That retiree number is growing because we have a lot of tenure in the system. We have a lot of our members getting closer and closer to retirement. So that annuitant number is growing. We're managed by a 6-member board, basically, that are members of our system. They're appointed by the governor, approved by the Senate, and they're all members of our system itself. We have members all across the state, from the Valley, from Kingsville to Plano to Perrington. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, outside of Amarillo. So they're all over the state. They are appointed by the governor and are approved by the board. Our membership varies from San Antonio with that amount of employees, 6,000 city. We have the SAWS employees, to a lot of our cities that just have 1 employee. So it varies all across the state of what size of our entities are. I'm going to talk more about that. Switch the slide for me. We're very unique than other pension plans, and I compare us quite a bit to the teacher's retirement system. I don't know if anybody in this room knows anybody who works for the school district or UTSA or whatever it might be. The teacher's retirement system is a defined benefit plan. What does that mean? They take your highest paid 5 years of salary times a number times a factor, and that is your benefit. It is defined when you start working for that public entity. We're a little bit different. We're considered a hybrid cash balance plan. What does that mean? A longer an employee works for you, the more years they contribute into the system, the higher the benefit. We're very similar to defined contribution plans, where if that employee puts more years in, puts more money in, earns more interest, they receive a higher benefit. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're a little bit different than how these other public plans work. We have a very, very strong funding policy. We're over 87% funded as a system. We continue to increase every year in funding because we're going to make sure those assets are in place. We made several changes. We have a very, very strong investment return assumption, one of the lowest in the nation, of 6.75%. We've made changes to our system to assure those assets are there. So we've made some changes since 2007 to reduce volatility in our city rates. We don't want these rates fluctuating, because if they do, our cities are going to make changes. We keep those rates consistent for our cities, and we want to make sure those assets are there to pay for benefits. Okay. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
One quick question. The 87%, how does that compare to other states?
Other statewide systems, off the top of my head, the teachers is about 77, 78. ERS, Employees Retirement System, for state employees is around that same level. And the county system, which are the 4 largest system, is about our same level.
Okay.
About 87, 88%.
Thank you.
But the teachers in the state, I'm not talking bad about them, are very, very well funded. The teachers' retirement system is huge. I don't know if you know this. There are 1 million members. And they have right now about $145 billion in assets. So they're large. They're just a large public retirement system. Okay? Any other questions about that other slide I talked about? This is a voluntary state plan. And what do I mean by that? Our cities choose to join this system. Okay? We don't force our cities to come into the plan. They choose to participate with us. We have cities joining all the time. Okay, there's not really many more out there, but there's technically 1,600 incorporated municipalities in Texas. Okay? You could be incorporated, but not have city employees. Okay? You just incorporated, quote unquote, how TML, Texas Municipal League, recognizes them. Each city stands on their own. Okay? You as a city of Helotes only fund the employees that work here. You're not funding employees' benefits in San Antonio. But we have portability. What's unique about our plan is if you hire somebody from San Antonio with 5 years service, that money they contributed with San Antonio is matched by them. When they come and work for you, only the money they contribute here is matched by you as a city. That makes sense, okay? But we bridge those years of service. So if they worked 10 years in San Antonio and 10 years for the city of Helotes, they have 20 years in the system, they would be eligible to retire. The 10 years funded by San Antonio, the 10 years funded here. Okay? That's what makes our system unique, but each separate city stands on their own. We study each one independently, we determine actuarial costs for you, but we don't commingle those liabilities across cities. We commingle the assets and pull those together for investment purposes, but not the liabilities. Okay? Questions what I just talked about there, because it makes us very unique in the teacher's retirement system that is basically one plan. Okay? There's an array of benefits we allow our cities to choose. Different employee levels of 5, 6, 7%, matching levels. There's additional provisions called updated service credits, which updates their account based on salary or plan changes through their career. There's cost of living increases, and we have different vesting requirements. And I'm going to go through your benefits here in just a sec, how it works for you. Okay? Any questions on this slide? Pretty clear? Okay, thank you. The majority of our benefits do come from our investments. And that's what makes this such a good pension plan. The majority of the earnings of an employee receives in retirement, once they retire, comes from those investment earnings. Okay? Our administrative costs are extremely low. Okay? In comparison to 401k type plans, and you probably are pretty familiar how that works in private industry type retirement, but our costs are very, very low in comparison. Okay? Our 6.75% assumed rate of return that we do in these studies is one of the lowest in the nation. Teachers' retirement system is 7.5%, 8% rate of return. So that is the long-term investment earnings that are projected when we do these studies for you. But ours is extremely, extremely conservative compared to everybody else. But that's just what we wanted to make sure in place for our cities to have those assets to pay for benefits. Okay? Any questions about this slide, how it works?
That's just your assumed rate of return.
Correct.
That's not your actual.
Investments can vary. I mean, last year was a banner year for everybody. After the election, the market took off. We made 13% last year in the portfolio. But by statute, and this is written in our statute, we credit a minimum of 5% on member accounts and that's 6.75 on our city accounts. What we did with that excess money, we stuck in a reserve. They call it deferred gains, but I call it a reserve. We have reserve money there in case the market fluctuates. We take those reserve assets that we have to pay that interest rate forward. Okay? And we've developed this for a reason, because there's always downturns in the market. This year, the market's been going up and down. I know it's taken off. Today it took off, but yesterday it dropped 200 points. There's been fluctuations, but that's what we're doing long term. I will tell you this, Mayor, we're still continuing to grow. I told this to a council the other day. We are paying right now $1 billion in benefits a year. We're growing $1 billion a year in assets. And what does that tell you? Well, people keep moving to Texas. Our city's tax base, sales tax base continues to grow. It's just what's occurring. And where I live in the Austin area, you can't even drive anymore because of the traffic. It's just what's happening to our state. Yeah. And that's basically everywhere. I mean, our valley cities, the Metroplex area, the Houston area, it's just where we're at right now. But we do have that in place, Mayor. It is very important to us because we don't want to have our cities cover that cost and interest rate. We have that reserve in place to buffet any rate increases or anything. I kind of gave you too much explanation, sorry.
No, it's okay. And your 0.25% administrative cost, I know that's very good. Is that fairly consistent year to year?
It really doesn't fluctuate much from that level because we really haven't grown in employees. We're about 120 employees total. And I'm talking investments, administrative, part of the travel team I manage that we're out in the field working. Anything we do internally, our board costs or whatever, that's typically all the administrative piece that I'm talking about. Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about this slide? Next slide, please. Our investments are right now, and our total size is right at about $29 billion. Had a good year last year, and we're continuing to increase in that number, and I talked a little bit about it. I've had questions about our investment policy, and we have a very, very transparent website. I always encourage all my members, whether it's council members or whatever it might be, go to our website, tmrs.com or .org, and I have some other handout information I'm going to give you after we're through here, that you can go and look specifically what we're doing in investments. Our chairman of the board wants complete transparency. So everything we do after a board meeting, anything we do in management as far as the funds we move around, we post on that website. It is very, very clear and precise. I always tell my membership, if you have questions of what we're doing with the investments, go to our website. We update it constantly of what we're doing as a system. Okay? Stable income is key for our retirees. We want to make sure we have those investments in place. We want to make sure those employees that retire with you have that lifetime benefit, have that annuity for them for the rest of their life. So that is key. We want to make sure they have that benefit in place and not rely on other type of public services that are available to them, which we know there are. Next slide, please.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
I didn't take the time to go to your website, but I'm assuming that within this program you have certain portfolios that the employee can choose from?
No.
No?
That's what's
Is it
very
just
unique about our system.
one big pool?
We invest everything for them. We manage the entire pool of $29 billion for the employee.
Are you looking at a mix of mutual funds and bonds?
We're
exchange
about
traded
right now, and because it fluctuates with us. We move a lot of money around almost at every board meeting. We're right about a 65-35 split. And I'm rounding this off because it kind of varied a little bit after our last board meeting. 65% equities, which could include everything from real estate to mutual funds, individual stock, domestic, any type of that equity piece, to about 35% fixed income, which could be cash, corporate bonds, government bonds. There's a lot of pieces in there. But we're a pretty sound mix. We're not overly aggressive with the money because we're a long-term investor. We have the assets that in turn, if the market dropped 200 points today, we have the assets to buy the stock if the market turns around and comes back with another 200 points. It's just we have that liquidity. But we're a pretty sound mix around that 65-35% level.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sir, did you have a third-party advisory firm then that?
Oh, yes. We have as many advisors as we have RFK is one of our biggest investment advisors. We have about each class that we have has an individual advisor for that class. Okay. So we have a director of, like our director of real estate, for example, who handles all our real estate piece, has a specific advisor that helps us with that real estate piece. That's the same thing with equities, fixed income, all that pieces. Our main advisor is RFK, though. He's done a lot of work for us. Okay. But there's a lot of info on that website. Check it out. There's a lot of good detailed information. Any other questions on this one? Or do we already switch?
We're on 7, yes.
Okay, we're going good. As members of this system, the key is they're rewarded with these long-term investments and prudent investments. We want to make sure that money's in place for those employees. You as a city, I don't know if you know this, from day one, immediately start contributing for that employee's pension. Okay? You fund it. Okay? But that employee does not touch any matching money, does not earn the match until they do what? This is not like private industry. They have to retire to receive the benefit. If you work for any public entity, you've got to retire to receive that benefit. This is not like private industry. If you had a 401k type plan, well, if you leave the company, what do you typically do with your 401k? You take it with you. You refund it, pay the taxes, or roll it over, quote unquote, to avoid the taxation. So that money you contribute, we prudently invest to have there to pay for their benefits. Okay? There's a lot more vulnerability if individual employees put money in the market or 401k type plans. Because if you have individual assets invested in the market, well, yesterday the market dropped 200 points. Well, today it went up 200 points. There's a lot more volatility there. Okay? And there's been downturns. Everybody had a big downturn in 2007, 2008. So that downturn actually hurt a lot of individuals' individual retirement accounts. That really wasn't the case with us. We were almost at that time, almost an entirely fixed income portfolio, so we didn't really have a big hit as far as our assets. We did start diversifying around that time frame, but it really didn't affect our benefits for our employees or our rates for our cities. And that's what we want to do, is reduce that volatility in pulling those assets together, okay? The next slide, I think, is one of the important ones. I'm going to talk to you this evening, and then we're going to go through your benefits. I've always felt this benefit you provide your employees is part of the three-legged stool in retirement. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this. A lot of people say there should be 4 legs right now, but the pension benefits you provide through TMRS are one leg of this stool, the retirement program. Okay? The second leg is what Social Security provides us. Paying that 6.25%, an employee can start receiving it at 62. Full retirement age is based on your date of birth, 66, 67, 68, whatever it might be. And the third leg should be some type of personal savings, your individual investments, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, whatever it might be. If you don't have one of these legs, the other 2 have to make up for it. You have a very important piece here for your employees of that retirement program. That's what gives them that security for working for you and having a secure retirement benefit. I think this has been lost. I don't know if you guys know the news now. A lot of people retiring right now are getting to the point of relying just one leg of that stool. And what is it? Social Security. Okay? And it's been lost. So this is an important piece that you provide your employees, is that TMRS retirement program. Okay? Let's go to your benefits and talk about what you provide now.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you say that lifetime benefits for retirees and survivors, does the survivors get the same amount as the retiree, let's say, that has passed?
Well, it varies on which option they choose. When they actually retire, when an employee retires from the city, they get to choose one of 7 annuity options. Okay? We have a life-only benefit, joint survivor options, and term options that they can choose. A survivor option means they get a benefit for the rest of their life. If they pass away, then they can choose to protect their spouse, for example, for the rest of their life. The annuity is lower because we're protecting 2 lives. But it's the various choices that they can choose. We go through that and we provide all that information to them when they're actually ready to retire. But there's different choices. It's the same pot of money that they earn. It's just different options they can choose. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good question. Any other questions about the benefits and how we provide it, or annuity type benefits? Okay, let's talk about your benefits.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Council, I just wanted to bring to your attention, the reason that staff has asked the mayor to place this on the agenda is right now we're doing the budget right now, essentially. And so when he starts going through these TMR, these portions or aspects of our retirement system, we can adjust things at this point for the next fiscal year. And so if it's the desire of council to change any of these components, then we need to know it sooner rather than later, because that then gets incorporated into our salary document or our budget document. So I just want to be clear that why you're hearing this now is not coincidental. It's because we're getting ready to go into the budget season, and salaries and benefits are, of course, the largest component of the annual budget. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Absolutely.
Actually, we're already in it.
Well, yes, we're already in it.
Can I ask?
The beads of sweat on his forehead to prove it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What you're saying is like the 6% employee contribution, we could go up to 7 if we, is that what you're saying?
You can make a number of changes, which I assume the gentleman will talk about. Most of the changes you're going to want to make, I would think, would be to increase benefit, and if you do that, it is going to change the contribution rate that the city has to provide to TMRS, and so there will be additional cost for that.
Rick, how competitive are we right now as far as what our employees are receiving versus comparable employees in other areas?
There are some, I think we're pretty comparable.
You're pretty comparable. The only level you're really not at is the 7% and the updated service credits, which I'll talk about a little bit here, if you want me to. I don't know if you want me to talk about rates and costs now this evening, or it's your call.
Just go ahead through your deal, and then we'll hit the
Okay.
sporadic.
Let's talk about what Rick was discussing in your present plan benefits. You're allowed to choose various choices. The employee contribution level could either be 5, 6, or 7%. All employees are at that level. Okay? You can have police at one level and then Parks and Rec and Public Works at a different level. You choose a plan level for all employees to contribute. You can change that 6% to 7%. That can be effective any month if you wanted to. There is a cost, and if you want to go through that, we can talk about that, but that level can be changed to 7%. You're already at the 2-to-1 match level, which basically all our cities around you are at. San Antonio's 2-to-1, Bandera, Bernie, you name them, everybody's at the 2-to-1 level, so you're already at the highest level we provide. Okay. Updated service credit was last adopted here in 2013. What is that provision? That provision actually updates your employees' accounts, your individual employees here, based on salary changes or plan changes. I'll give you an example. Let's say you hire a police officer making $40,000 a year. I'm making this up. I have no idea what your salary structure is. And that officer is built his salary up working here 15, 20 years to $55,000, $60,000 a year. Again, I'm making this up. Okay? The updated service credits will actually go back and update his pension to be more in line with his final salary level, not what he was making 15, 20 years ago. Does that make sense? Okay. That is a provision that keeps these pensions more in line with their final salary, not their lower salary when they started with you. Okay. That was last adopted in 2013. You can adopt that provision effective January 1st, only January 1st. Okay. COLA for retirees. This is specifically only a retiree benefit. Once an employee retires here and begins their annuity, whatever option they select, you as a city would provide them a COLA based on the Consumer Price Index. And we have various percentages you could adopt, 30 or 50% or 70% of the CPI. Okay? That was last adopted for retirees in 2013. That provision could be adopted also effective with a January 1st date. Only January 1st. I don't know, what's your start date here for your budget? October 1?
Yeah.
October 1 start date?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about those two provisions, how they work specifically? Those are the two that you just haven't adopted in a while, since 13. You have a 5-year vesting provision, which actually gives the employees two benefits, basically. Once they receive 5 years, they earn a right to a pension. They still have to meet qualifications, but they become vested in the pension plan. Secondly, survivor benefits are provided. That means if one of your employees passes away for whatever reason it might be, the benefit would be paid to the designated beneficiary. Okay? And so whatever money's accumulated in the plan. You have a police officer, works here 10 years, God forbid he passes away in the line of duty, we would pay that 10 years of money plus the matching money to the designated beneficiary. It is a true survivor benefit. Okay? That is provided once an employee becomes vested. Death benefits. You also provide an insurance policy for your employees. This is paid directly through TMRS for active and retirees. If an employee passes away while on payroll, the beneficiary will receive 1-year annual salary. Whatever their salary is, if that employee receives a raise, we average that in, but that would be paid to the designated beneficiary. It is very similar to a whole life, term life insurance policy. Okay? You provide that benefit already to your employees. As a retiree, there's two pieces to it. Once they retire with you and begin their pension, the death benefit changes to $7,500. $7,500. And that usually helps our retirees with burial or funeral expenses, pretty typically. Okay? Restricted service credit is a time credit provision. So any previous public service the employee has, military, federal, county, school district, state, they can receive time credit for it. There's no monetary value, but the time credit helps them with vesting or eligibility for retirement. And it's strictly time. So if you had an employee that had 10 years of military, which is big here in the San Antonio area, they could receive 10 years of time credit. If they work here 10 years, they would be eligible to retire. But what would their pension be based on? Only the 10 years of money. It's always based on the money in the plan. This is strictly a time credit provision. Okay. Military service credit, if an employee was on the payroll by a certain date, January 1st of 2003, they can actually do a military buyback of up to 5 years. Retired military personnel are ineligible for a buyback. Okay. Employees have 2 ways they can retire here. Age 60 with 5 years service, or 20 years any age. Okay. Either one. They would be eligible if they wanted to start a pension benefit at that time. Okay. Questions about how these benefits are, how they work?
I had a note here. Do cities not participating in the TMRS system or program generally have their own, or do they just not have a retirement plan for their employees?
Typically, cities that don't participate with us already had an existing pension plan in place prior to us.
Oh, okay.
You know, Dallas and Fort Worth are 2 prime examples. We became operational in 48. They were operational in the 30s. So was Austin. It's just, we were really designing as a system for the smaller cities. Don't get me wrong, Mayor, we have some big entities. You know, we have Plano and Arlington and Corpus Christi and San Antonio. Those are our 4 largest cities, and there's quite a few employees, but those larger cities already had their own DB plan in place. They didn't need TMRS. We were really created for those smaller cities in the state. And that's really where we were created back in 1948. Some cities, maybe comparable to a Lotus, don't have a pension for their employees. And it's difficult for them, I hate to say this, but I've run into this already, it's hard for them to recruit and retain employees. It's like a revolving door. So they're constantly having to retrain employees, and in the long run, it's costing them more money to get new employees constantly retraining them than having some type of benefit in place for them. And that's a big issue, especially with cities maybe this size, is that recruitment and retention. You want to recruit good employees and keep good employees. That's typically what a lot of my cities are looking at, especially with benefits. Benefits are key. Salary structure is key too, obviously. You know, because pension with us is based on what their salary is. Because what they're contributing is whatever their salary is, tax deferred, 26 pay periods a year, into an account in Austin, which we pay interest on, and the city matches. So that's the growth of the pension, is what you pay them in salary and what type of benefit structure you have. That is key. Okay.
Then I had one other question just to follow up, but make sure I understood you correctly. You said the only way an employee can get money out of the system is to retire. I'm pretty sure you said that would be for the matching part, because it makes sense to me that if an employee leaves without retiring before they're eligible to retire, they can always take their cost basis with them,
Absolutely.
but they don't get the matching.
Just like a 401k.
Is that paid in lump sum when they leave?
It's what
or-
they choose to do. If you have an employee who works here 10 years and then leaves, and they refund their account, they refund what they contributed, the 6% plus the interest earned. They either refund it and pay the 20% tax plus the penalties, or they roll it over to avoid the taxation.
Okay.
But if they pull the money out and refund it, what do they lose?
The match.
All that match
Yeah.
that you contributed for them.
Yeah,
The
okay.
key is they have to retire.
I just wanted to be sure they did get their cost
That
basis.
becomes an actuarial gain for the city, because you funded that employee through that 10-year time frame. Well, you have an asset there that pays for the next employee that becomes eligible, or the next employee that starts their annuity or annuitized benefit. So it becomes an actuarial gain for the city, but it fluctuates, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of my cities are different. Some of my cities have turnover, some do not. Some have turnover in key positions. So it just varies from city to city.
Okay, thanks.
So, excuse me, so the 5-year vesting, I know in some other entities, once they're vested for 5 years and they leave 10 years later, they do get the match.
Right. Vesting means a right to a retirement, but they still have to meet qualifications. Okay? I'll give you an example. Let's say you hire somebody that's age 40, they work 5 years and they leave. They go work somewhere else, private industry. They have the choice to leave the money in the system because they're vested. Now they're 45. If they never return to a public entity, another Texas statewide system, because there's service that's bridged with other systems, or another TMRS city, their first eligible date to get their money plus matching money is age 60. Because the minimum requirement is age 60 with at least 5 years service. Okay? Does that make sense?
So they leave the money in,
They could choose to leave the money in, continue to earn interest on that account because they're vested, and then get a future retirement benefit when they turn age 60.
And at that point, they would get the matching funds.
Absolutely, because they chose to leave it in. It doesn't happen very much because, I hate to tell you, when an employee leaves, the first thing they ask for is what?
Give me the money.
Show me the money.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it that way, but give me the money. It's just that generation right now, and they refund their accounts. Well, if they refund their accounts, they lose that match. Okay. It's a little bit different than private industry, because I came from private industry also way back 21 years ago. When I worked for New York Life out of college, I had phase vesting. I could be vested after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and there would be a different match. And typically, if I left the company, I'd take it with me. Okay? It's a little bit different in the public industry. You've got to retire to receive the benefit. Okay?
One
Yes,
more
sir.
question, but before you get into your options. You mentioned your reserves above the 6.75% that you hold in reserve. Is there ever an adjustment to that reserve amount, or does it just continue to grow?
Well, right now, we have a percentage of the portfolio we're keeping, but we are adjusting it based on market returns. The last numbers I saw at the board meeting was around 3 to 4% of our assets, but that could change. Don't quote me on that, council member, because, you know, the market's kind of fluctuated this year. I don't know if you've seen how the market's performed this year. It's been kind of flat. There's anticipation it's going to come back towards the end of the year, but then again, we do not know.
I mean, it's similar to the USAA system in that the amount that's in reserve can be adjusted from
Sure.
time to time as you
Sure.
choose. And
Absolutely.
you all decide that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of our investment advisors determine that also. I mean, if they determine we need to keep a 5% reserve, then we'll do a 5% reserve. You know, I think that's kind of high personally, but, you know, it's always fluctuated. And USAA is a prime example. They do fluctuate theirs based on rate of return, investment earnings. Did the market take off last year, 13, 14%? Well, you might not need as large as a reserve as you did in previous years. So sure, it could fluctuate.
Thank you.
I did have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have a question? I did have one back on one of your slides. You say retirement savings of TMRS members were not affected by the severe market downturn in 2008, whereas 401K asset values declined more than 25% on the average. Are you saying that the system did not take a negative number for a return?
Well, we were very, very fortunate, Mayor, to tell you the truth, because prior to our diversification, we just started diversifying our portfolio. In 2008, we were all fixed income.
Oh, good for you.
We knew it was going to happen, so we started. I'm lying. We didn't know. But it just to give you a little historical perspective about us, we were 60 years only a fixed income portfolio. And I started in the system 21 years ago. And back then, during the Jimmy Carter days when interest rates were very high, we were crediting 10, 11, 12% interest on these accounts. I don't know if you remember back then.
Oh, yeah.
What were interest rates?
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're coming back up. They're starting to creep back up. And our investment advisors have already told us, keep some money in fixed income, because they see these bonds increasing in value. But that's really where it came from. We did start diversifying the portfolio after that downturn in 2008. Okay?
Yeah, good.
It was just a time frame. We were lucky at that time, yes, sir.
Thanks.
You want to go through some benefits real quick? I know I'm taking up too much of y'all's time. Nope. Okay, let's talk about benefits. If you wanted to look at an individual benefit, like adopting an updated service credit, okay? Did you give him this plan study sheet?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And if you looked at that plan study sheet on Plan 1, it talks about adopting an updated service credit, which would be a one-time adoption effective January 1st. Okay? That's a one-time, I know it's kind of difficult to see. And your actuarial cost right now, this is effective January 1st, 2019, is right at 6.7% of payroll. So the employees are contributing 6%. You as a city are matching it at 2-to-1, but your cost is only 6.7%. But you are funding a 2-to-1 level. Okay? Why is that? You've got some assets there. You haven't had many employees hit retirement. Okay? You've had employees leave, refund their accounts. So you have some assets there that are paying such a low rate, basically. If you decide to go to Plan 1 and adopt a one-time updated service credit, your rate would increase January 1st of 2019 to 6.85% of payroll. Okay? And I can translate that into dollars because I pulled some dollar figures out for you too, if you want to go through that. Or we can wait. It's up your call. Okay?
I think we need to get an idea of what they're looking at first.
Okay, I took your payroll from our last study, and your valuation payroll for the year was right at 3.7 million. Is that about right? Probably in budget, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. It's probably around that level. Presently, right now, what you're contributing to employees at the current level, you're contributing right at about $247,900. If you go to Plan 1, it increases to $253,450, so an increase of $5,000. I'm talking dollars here.
That's per year?
One-time increase, but that would be a budgeted increased item. Yes, sir.
Okay. What was the first number?
The first number, what you're contributing now on your present plan, is $247,900.
Okay.
Again, you're looking at budget right now, so my payroll numbers could be a little off. But I took your last actuarial evaluation, what we had in place as far as your data coming into us. Okay. Okay, if you go to Plan 2, and this includes a transferable element. And what is the transfer? If you look at the very bottom of the sheet, you have 17 eligible employees that you hired from other cities that left money in the system, in TMRS, and now work for you. Okay? So you have those employees that have bridged that proportionate service. If you adopt the same updated service credit with the transferable element, the transfer and the update will actually update their previous account to reflect that salary change. So there's a little bit increase in liability to the city for doing this. That rate increases to 7.17% of payroll. Okay. In dollars, it's an increase of a little over $17,000 per year.
So when you're saying Plan 1 versus Plan 2, looking at your numbers here, I'm not following how we're coming up with these percentages. Can you do that real briefly?
Yeah, it's only the transfers, and what the transfer is basic. This is the updated service credit provision that actually updates their account based on any salary changes that employee has. In a transfer update, it will actually go back and look at their previous TMRS account. You hire a police officer from Bandera. They made a lower salary in Bandera compared to what you pay them here. Again, I'm making this up. And they come here to higher salary. Well, the transferable element will actually go back and look at their Bandera account and update it based on any type of salary difference that might have been reflective from Bandera to Helotes. Okay? This is the only time it bridges across TMRS accounts. Okay? This provision, it seems like to me, you have 17, it's at the note at the very bottom, you have 17 employees on the payroll right now that you hired from other cities this would affect. Okay? That's where you see that increase. So it's really affecting only that 17, quote unquote, Mayor. Only that 17. The updated service credit for everybody, if you adopt that, is affecting all your employees. Yes, sir.
So Plan 2 just affects the transfers
and
everybody else.
And the updated service credit.
But it's a benefit to
But
the
that
transfer.
increase from 6.85 to 7.17, that marginal difference there of 0.3 something percentage of payroll is that 17 transferable employees. Okay? And I'd have to go back and pull the data, which I could, and tell you who they are. I could actually run reports for employees and showing them what the benefit would look like with these type of plan changes. Because so we can show those type of benefits. You know, you could show it on your present plan and then any type of plan changes. We could do that for employees too. That's not a problem. We have all sorts of data you can provide, okay? If you go to Plan 3, and this is including a one-time adoption on the updates with the transfers and a one-time cost of living increase for your retirees. Remember I talked about the retiree benefit where you would give them a COLA in their pension check? That cost goes up to 7.26%. There's not much difference because you just don't have many annuitants. You just don't have many retirees here. Okay? See how that difference in 7.17 to 7.26. That increase is a little over $27,000 per year.
I noticed on each one of these, the unfunded liability is increasing also. Could you explain how that?
Yeah, the unfunded liability will increase accordingly based on a plan improvement.
Based upon that number you're just giving us?
Based on that number I gave you. And that unfunded liability is amortized over a 25-year schedule. Okay? So if you do make a plan improvement, that UAL will go up. Okay? But it is funded over that 25 years, just like a mortgage. You're paying off that mortgage through that schedule. You're not paying us that full liability, but that's if all employees retired. If all employees meet eligibility and get their benefit, that is the total liability to the city. But yes, if you do make an improvement, Mayor, it does increase accordingly based on whatever plan structure you do choose. Okay.
So is the unfunded liability, I know I've heard this before, but is that generally based on a percentage of something? I mean, when we're looking at this unfunded liability going up, where should it be in relation to?
Well, if you're looking at funding ratios, okay, look right below the liability. You see the amortization schedule is 25 years. If you see your present funding ratio right now, it's 90.3%. So what does that mean? We have 90% of assets right now to pay for benefits. So you're extremely well funded. You're higher than TMRS. Okay? But it varies for all my cities. I have some cities at 75, 80%. Typically a threshold for public entities, and this is just GASB regulations that are in place, is if a public entity is around 80%, they're well funded. Okay? But many of our cities are above that threshold. If you go to Plan 1, see how your rate dropped a little bit? Yeah. To 89.5. If you go to Plan 2, it dropped a little bit more to 88%. If you go to Plan 3, it dropped a little bit more to 87.6. Why is that? Because you made a plan improvement, so your liability did increase slightly based on that improvement you chose.
And so from what you're saying then, would a good safe line then be 80% or higher?
Typically, a lot of my cities want to stay above that 80% threshold. Some don't. I mean, it's hard for me to tell you, Mary, what's different from here than Alamo Heights or Castle Hills or Schertz or Selma. You know, I have so many different entities that I work with. Everyone's different, you know. Some tell me they have increased tax base and they want to have the best plan in place for their employees. It's just liability right now. Some of my cities overfund the plan to reduce that liability. It's just what they do. They have that flexibility to do it. But typically, yes, that 80% threshold is what a lot of entities look at.
Thanks.
But it varies.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I notice here that you didn't include increasing the deposit rate to 7% on these.
These are the requests that was sent to our actuary. Yeah, but
and,
I can do that.
And that's fine. But doing so, increasing it to 7%, that would make the employee increase their contribution to the system, correct?
Right.
Which means that their paycheck would go down.
Is less, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about increases. Let's say you give your employees a 1% increase in budget. Okay, they don't see the 1%. Who gets their first cut? Who always gets their first cut in the United States of America? Yeah. If you pay taxes. Okay? So they don't see that 1% increase in salary. They've got to pay Social Security, they got to pay FICA, they got to pay Medicare, all that piece. A 1% contribution to us, to TMRS, is pre-tax money. It's tax deferred. So there's no tax on that money until that employee chooses whether to retire or refund the account. So it does make a difference in take-home pay, absolutely, but it's not that big a difference. Okay. You know, I could actually look at numbers for you and show you what the take-home pay would look like in comparison to putting that additional 1%. And obviously, if you go up to 7%, it makes a difference.
Now, if you go up to 7%, the impact on the city is the matching, correct? So
Correct.
instead of 12%, we're at 14%.
Well, it just depends on what type of plan provision. I mean, I've had cities go to 7% and then adopt a one-time updated service credit. Okay? I would have to go back and look at the rates and run them for you, which I can do tonight or tomorrow and show you what they look like. But there would be an increased liability, but the effect on employees would be more. Why is that? Because now they're putting 1% more out of their paychecks, which earns higher interest on it, and it's matched by the city.
Certainly.
Okay? So typically the impact, I'm just talking for employees, the impact is higher if you do make that plan level change to go to 7%, sure.
It's also easier for our higher paid personnel to
Absolutely.
absorb that with the higher, with the increases in healthcare costs.
And you know, healthcare costs are pretty expensive for our cities right now. And a lot of my cities, what they've done, and I know you're working on budget right now, they'll kind of offset that a little bit with their employees, and they'll say, well, we're going to help you with that 1% more into TMRS. Maybe we'll give you a 3% increase in salary this year, COLA or cost of living increase, whatever you call it, or merit, to help you offset that additional 1% into TMRS. You know, my cities have done it various ways. It just varies what you're looking at in budget, so.
And the only other thing I'll say is currently we're at 6.94%, if I recall. So the changes up to Plan Change 3 are still relatively in line with our current cost. Obviously, if you go to 4 and 5, you're looking at doubling the costs, and I'm sure you're going to explain why. But
Sure. If you want to go through those different plan levels of 4 and 5, this is a different provision. This is adopting it on a repeating basis. That means you're pre-funding all updated service credits for your employees, and you're sending us those contributions to pre-fund the benefit. If you do it one time, it is considered ad hoc. That means it's only that one-time provision. If you go to Plan 4 and go to a repeating benefit both on updated service credits and COLAs, your rate goes all the way up to 14.41% of payroll. Okay? And if you can see, what does the liability number do? It quadruples. Okay? And so what does your funding ratio do? The same. Okay? It decreases tremendously because you're taking all that liability up front and pre-funding a repeating benefit. That's the same case if you go to Plan 5, but that's a little bit lower in the updated service credit provision, which you can adopt that at a 75% level or 50%, and the COLA can be reduced at 50%. You had two other provisions they adopted you looked at, 6 and 7, and that basically looks at almost the same type of provisions, repeating updates and repeating COLAs. And Plan 7 is going to a reduced updated service credit and COLA.
Is there a recommendation amongst these
I
plans?
never, ever, ever in the 21 years I've been in the system have told my cities what to do. I always want them to make the decision, you know, and it's, but I will tell you this, if you want to make improvements and you want to look at improving the benefits, get to that 7-2-to-1 level if you can. Yeah, because more contributions into the system benefit younger employees, putting more money into the plan earlier in their career, and of course the older employees. That will benefit also. I would tell you, if you can, get that updated service credit in place. If you can get it at a repeating level, that's great. The COLA benefit gets pretty expensive because the cost of living increase for retirees under our entry age normal method, I don't know if anybody knows an actuary, I work with them all the time, you have to pre-fund all this benefit. So it gets very expensive for our cities to adopt the provision. But a lot of my cities have said, what type of benefit structure should I look at? I said, my larger cities, medium-sized cities, try to get to that 7-2-to-1 level. Yes, sir.
Did you say the 7% with a 2-to-1 match?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And you'd be able to provide us
Sure.
the difference in what it would cost the city at
Provide
a
you
7% versus what we
anything
have
you
now at
need.
6? Okay.
We can do the 7-2-to-1 mayor. You can do the updates if you wanted to. The same type of plan, proposed plans here that you received. Whatever you need, Mayor, you just let me know.
Okay.
We can run them for you.
And Rick will get with you on that, but I would ask the council, while we're here and you're here, I would think that we'd want to stay with the, what the heck am I trying to say here? The funded ratio of 80% or higher, and show us what it would look like on this next budget to go 7%
Okay,
with the 2-to-1 match.
okay. We can do that.
About the updated service credit and
I don't
the-
know, you kind of lost me there, so.
It's a complicated provision.
No, actually remember, believe it or not, we've
I was
been
paying
through this
attention, too.
before, 5 years ago.
Yeah, I
do
remember it.
recall going through this whole thing, and I
Yeah.
remember being mind-boggled
It
at
was as
that
bad
time.
then as it was tonight.
But I kind of almost get
Then
it.
I didn't do a good job. That's not good.
And we did decide to go ahead and give them in 2013 the updated service
update.
credit. If not, so the question is, if we don't do that, then these 17 transfer employees are stuck back on the level that they first came in.
Well, all
That's-
employees are stuck at their present level because you haven't really updated salary changes. I mean, if,
So they're still stuck at the 2013 level.
correct.
Okay.
Well, then we need to look at that number also.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna provide you, because I wanted to, if you really want to look at something, let's look at the 7%. I'll get you those rates with an update.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at is 1, 2, and 3
Okay?
at 6, and then at 7%, and then we can see what the difference in price would be.
I agree.
And we can, and I can put that together for you, Rick, in an email, or if she wants to email me again, I'll put it together for you.
Rick, can we look at that from the opposite direction too? If you took the median salary and the median age of an employee and try to figure out what the cost benefit would be to that mythical individual, just to see,
Regarding their paycheck,
right,
yeah.
okay,
So we can
Just
do a
the
paycheck.
median salary based upon all of our salaries.
yeah.
Taking
Right.
out maybe the top and the bottom.
Because you're gonna have to explain this as we're either providing an additional benefit if they don't see what it is that they're gonna get out of it. I don't think we're gonna get as much value out of it as if we were able to say, this is what would happen if you were this age and this salary.
We can come back and do employee meetings too, prior to implementing anything. So I got no problem coming back out here. I'll bring one of my travel managers out here to do the meetings for you to explain all this. Whatever you choose or whatever, we can go through the benefits. I don't think, I've been in the system 21 years. I don't know if anybody's ever come out here and done employee meetings. And I'm the senior manager for all this area, so it's probably, I do not know. So we probably could do that for you too.
Yeah, no,
even-
typically we've done it for ICMA, but that's
Yeah,
because
but
that's
that's
a
deferred
different.
compensation. That's
that's-
457.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, but we can take care of you. Whatever we need to do, you tell us. That's no problem.
Question, if I could. Earlier in the presentation, you indicated that the benefit that the employee receives is based on their 5-year highest average of earnings, right?
That's teacher's retirement system.
Okay. So this, this updated service credit, without the updated service credit, obviously the employee's putting in amount of money. Let's say they make $30,000 on average for their first 10 years and say $40,000 for their second 10 years of employment before they choose to do their retirement. So they're putting it in at the 30,000, we're matching it a double, and then it's growing over in interest. But this updated service credit basically says when they retire or when they end, if they were making 40, then we're backfilling it as if they had made 40 their entire career here, and we're matching it based on that 40 at their end salary, not the incremental step-by-step time.
Correct.
And that's
That's-
why it gets really terribly expensive when we do the repeating, because if we only do it at this year, just like we only did it in 2013, then we've only brought them current to whatever they make this year. And then 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, as their salaries go up, their pension benefit doesn't change again. And I think that's kind of where this, the options 4 and 5 with the repeating get extremely expensive, because we're planning every year to do the equivalent of doing it once every year like that. Am I right there?
And that's an excellent analogy because, I will tell you this, some of my cities do follow the same pattern you guys do. Some will do it every other year. Some will do it every 2 or 3 years. But 5 years would take care of all those employees you had in place, and that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, but every time you skip a year, you have to play catch-up the following year.
Correct.
And it gets even harder to play catch-up.
And it gets more
And that's
expensive.
why we're in that position now. Had we been doing this every year since 2013, you wouldn't see a $2 million amount there. You'd probably only see you know,
maybe half that.
yeah, every year you would be
Because-
picking up a little bit of it instead of
Because you are,
holding that
if
five
you go
and
to,
then lump sum.
if you look at the repeating number, and you're absolutely correct, council member, you're pre-funding
Mm-hmm.
that benefit. You do take an immediate hit on liability, but you're pre-funding all that benefit in place. It'll stay at that level and actually increase in fund. And we can do projection reports too. I don't know if Leslie, she didn't give you any of this stuff. I can do projection reports to tell you what these rates look like 4 or 5 years down the road. So you can see what the funding ratio does.
I think we'd need to look at that, and if we would look at doing the repeating, then we'd need to know each year
Sure.
what we'd need to set aside in the budget going forward per year, even if it's an assumption of a certain percentage increase. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure, absolutely.
I just think that the benefit to the employee on doing this is I mean, that most of them would look at their individual paycheck by paycheck and say, hey, this isn't really helping me. But when it comes time for their retirement, they're gonna be able to live comfortably versus living paycheck to paycheck. And I think that the benefit to them, whether they retire from here or carry this to some other entity, is just gonna be phenomenal.
Absolutely.
I have employees where I work who, at USAA, they match 8% of your paycheck if you put it in, and they don't do it because they want the money in their paycheck
That's
today.
right. Well, that's
And
the
they're
mindset.
they're gonna.
They're not part of
kick
that three-legged stool, remember,
They're
so.
gonna kick themselves down the road.
Absolutely.
When they don't have it, and we're in the position of making it happen.
I will say back in 2013, though, the repeating components here or plans were in the double digits as well.
Yeah.
They weren't
I-
anywhere near the 6
Did we
to
come out and do a
7%.
presentation back then in 13?
Yes.
Do you know who did it?
was
Was
a
it one of my
lady.
travel
Somebody-
managers?
Gal,
Lady, Shannon Lucetto?
I don't remember the name.
I don't remember.
Okay,
But it
that's
was a
all right.
lady.
We'll take care of you. Whatever you need, Rick, you tell me, and I'll get all these numbers to you.
Well, I can tell you, the reason I bring that up is at that time, the budget could not withstand
It could not.
a 12, 13% funding or contribution rate, I should say. I will tell you that if council right now, just knowing what I know, if you go anywhere above the 7.26%, there will have to be considerable cuts in other departments
Yeah.
next fiscal year. I think I love the idea, but there will have to be considerable cuts in other departments.
Yeah, because we're gonna have to look at our projected revenues and some other things, so it's great to be as generous as we can with benefits, but we've gotta look at the rest of operating the city also.
So realistically speaking, we're talking about options 1, 2, or 3 is the maximum we could
Yeah,
could
The
consider.
deja vu, this is
Yeah.
exactly the conversation we had last.
But the one
5
thing
years
that's
ago.
important to remember is if we go to the step where we do the updated service credit this year, then moving to the repeating in a year or 2 or 3 will be a lot less of an effect.
sure.
As long as we don't wait 5 years to do it, we could possibly absorb it 2 years from now.
Well, we'll get the numbers together, and if we have to do this again before we start the budget presentation, we will, just to have a better understanding of it.
Absolutely.
I don't think our budget can do the repeating.
Not
ever,
this year, but
Ever.
it's hard to tell.
And as I recall, what do we have, 29 employees before Joe and Patty and Walton retired? So we're in the low 30s as far as active retired?
I would have to go back and look, Mayor. I don't recall. I don't know if you have.
You're right at about 30 active, but my numbers are a little off because we count them as a contributing member if they left the money in the system and now work in San Antonio.
Seemed like before we had 29, and then
about right.
we've had 3 or 4 retire here in the last couple of years. So we're probably up around 32 or 33 now.
You're right around that level, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
Anything
Any
else?
questions other than that?
I'm going to leave you some business
It's all
cards if you
crystal
need to
clear.
find me.
And we look so forward to the next time you're
All
here.
right, fantastic. I'm going back to Kyle, Texas, fighting
We-
traffic.
We appreciate you sharing all that with us.
All right, well, thank y'all. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
If we go any deeper, where he's gonna have 22 years of service with the team.
Both, because you have both brains, it's coloring.
Okay. This next one, item 8, Rick wants to toss his name in the pool of nominees for the Board of Trustees of the Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool. And Rick, if you want to, I underlined some things on this one letter, but if you want to tell them why you want to do this, and then we'll
Well, I can tell you
take a
that
motion in a second.
we have tried this every 2 or 3 years, and it's just something that I find interesting. I deal with the Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool, which is our insurance carrier, quite regularly, and I just have an interest in sitting on their board and seeing how they do business, frankly.
Okay, and like I said, we highlighted or underlined a couple of things that were of interest on that letter, so we'd ask for a motion and a second
Can I
to.
ask a question?
Sure.
Why place 11?
Place 11 was against the other city manager that's up, and so rather than go against the other different types of entities, I opted to choose a city manager.
He wants to duke it out with the city manager.
Awesome.
Well, I think the other ones are reserved for not municipalities, but other government types, and
Yeah.
so
Oh, okay.
How's the election held? Who votes?
it is by the members, all the members.
Oh, okay.
So we will have another opportunity to vote.
Yeah, they'll come out with a regular ballot, I'm sure.
You gotta win one of these days.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion and a second then to approve Rick tossing his name in the hat for this position.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item 8 as written.
We have a motion from Fredericks. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Massey. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, then we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. So Rick, you can follow up on that and do what you need to do.
So where do we put the banners and the signs? And, no.
That'll come later.
Fortunately, it doesn't work like that.
Not in the easement,
No,
anyway.
no door to door.
Not
no
in the
nothing.
east.
Not in the text easements, for sure.
Okay, that takes us to item number 9, which is discussion of and action on a request by SK&A Architecture for approval of a conceptual design plan in Old Town. And so I'd ask for a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this item.
Mayor, I make a motion to discuss, take action on 9.
Have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Blue.
Second from Blue. With a motion from Byes, second from Blue. Bert, it's your motion, so you're up.
Well, I'd just like to say that I agree with planning and P&Z's recommendation of approval of the conceptual design plan, including the site plan, building design, and exterior lighting.
That it?
That's it.
Alex?
Thank you. I agree with it in principle and in action. For those who may not have had a chance to see what was presented to planning and zoning, and since the architect isn't present today, what they basically did was they just realigned that building on the left to what you see on the right. They just turned it because P&Z and council both required that they reduce the impervious cover to 60%. In order to do that and to maintain their parking lots, they had to change the shape, not the shape and size, but the location of the building. And so they've essentially done that, and then they gave up a couple parking spots to build that little building on the top right-hand side, which the architect explained that the owner is intending to lease or somehow to the neighboring school that is just further to the right of that, intending to put in a gate and a fence to allow them access to that particular area. And I'm in complete concurrence. The one thing I would recommend that maybe as our staff has more opportunity to discuss this with the developer is that the question came up at planning and zoning about signage, and the architect said, we have no idea, every tenant's gonna have to come for a sign. And while that might work, I think there's gonna be a lot more work on our staff, and I think we if, you know, maybe not as a part of the motion exactly, but maybe if our staff would try to talk them into maybe doing a master sign plan for the development, it might allow our staff not only initially, but down the road, to be able to have those tenants not have to go through the entire planning and zoning and possibly council every time they want a sign to put up on the building, that they can have a master sign plan already prepared like so many other multi-tenant places do. So I would hope that our staff would encourage them to pursue a master sign plan for the development so that they don't have to come back later on every time they want a new sign.
Plus, they wouldn't have a hodgepodge of sign types.
Well, and it would be, yeah, it would allow them a little bit more uniformity in location, place, and size, but that's the whole idea of a master sign plan. But the architect was here, and he basically said, we're not doing signs, every tenant gets their own. I think it would be better served if we could convince them to go to the master sign plan. Those were my comments, but I'm in favor of this site plan here.
So that would mean that there would be no sign on either of the buildings? It would just be a monument in the front?
At this point, there is no plan for a monument, he said, and that the signs, that they plan to subdivide this particular building into multiple tenant occupancy, because it's 5,000 square feet or so. And every time a tenant wants to rent it, they're gonna have to come to the city to get a sign over their door or somewhere else, every time. And so one business leaves, a new one comes in, again, we're gonna run into that. So I think a master sign plan, they can plan all of that, and then it becomes a staff function and not come into anywhere else.
Councilwoman, the master sign plan would incorporate both wall signage and, if they opted to, a monument
Exactly.
sign as well.
Exactly.
And it allows for staff to do an administrative approval of the signage that comes before, rather than them having to go to P and Z
I got you.
or city
Okay,
council
that
each time.
makes sense.
It seems to me like this could have an amendment, and that could be a requirement of the approval, is that they have a multi-tenant monument sign as stipulated for Old Town. That should work, shouldn't it?
Y'all can make any amendment you
Well,
would
I
like.
think that but there should be, if they're all gonna be different, businesses, they should have on their own wall.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's what,
He said that can happen.
They're allowed to have both.
You just won't have a bunch of signs out front. which
Right,
I
no,
don't
we
know.
The development can have a monument multi-tenant sign, and then each business then can have a sign over its own business.
that's what
But,
I'm,
and
yeah.
that's acceptable, but I'm saying is, if we encourage them to do a master sign plan, it never has to come back to us. Staff just handles it.
Okay,
And they handle it based on the original one-time approval of the entire sign plan for the entire property.
Could we have a friendly amendment that would say a master sign
Yeah, that's what
plan?
we're saying,
Yeah.
yeah. And make that a part of the motion, that they have a multi-tenant monument sign as stipulated for Old Town.
Well, that a master sign plan, which I heard correctly, would include the monument sign and
I'm not
individual
familiar
signs.
with the way it's written.
They'd
would-
have to come
you would-
back to request what their plan looks
Right.
like.
You would just make, if y'all want a master sign plan for this development, you would just amend the motion to say that they are required to do a master sign plan for the development.
Okay.
But leave it at that, and then they would go before P and Z, or they would go before, well, and/or, not quite sure yet, city council on the master sign plan itself.
So we'd call it a master sign plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have a question. You, Alex, sorry.
I
I mean, why did the developer not want to do this? 'Cause
Well, he
he's-
was the
'cause-
architect.
Oh, he was the
He
architect.
was the architect for the building, and I don't know that he felt it was necessarily in his place. We have somebody here that
Oh.
might be able to answer this question.
I was
All
gonna
I
say
was
we-
saying was, I recommend they go that route for everybody's ease, the city as well as
Kyle,
the developer.
you wanna come up and comment? Come ahead. This is Kyle Holtz. He's, the owner. Developer, yeah.
Yeah, the architect didn't want to go that route, and it may not be his space to do that. That's why I was going to hesitate to make it a mandatory thing, just a recommendation, encouragement.
I would like to get the place built and occupied. And in today's environment, everybody who can work is employed, and every contractor prices have been escalated enormously. What costs $1 a year ago costs $1.30 now. Now, to address your thing on the sign, what we're doing is we're running an underground line up to the front of the property, so it'll have electricity for a tenant sign later on. But at this point in time, I am hard pressed, and I say hard pressed, to get the building built with the capital that I have to do it, between me and the banker. I would not like to see a sign plan forced on me in order to get my building permits. I intend at some point in time to have a sign out front, okay? Because it makes sense. It's easier to lease. The tenants that move in there pay their portion for the sign, and it's after the whole place is full, it's a no-brainer for me because it doesn't cost me anything. But at this point in time, a sign that you're talking about going out front there, and I did this for 30 years. I was in a sign business. You're talking, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000. I have no idea what you pay for your little sign out here, but if I had to make a guess, it was somewhere around $22,000.
Well, you can't
Okay.
have that kind of sign out there. We're talking-
25?
He's just using that as an example.
You can't
And
have-
you're low, but we're not saying you'd have to put it up right away. We're just saying that if and when you put one up, it would need to be a more of a multi-tenant sign.
It would
Even
be
if- Even if each
when it
tenant
goes
paid their
up,
own
it'll
sign.
have a space for each tenant.
Yeah, that's all we're
Okay?
saying.
And it'll be a monument sign because that's what the city of Lotus allows,
Yeah.
okay?
Well, if that's what you're planning to do, then they don't need to worry about it
At
unless you
some
guys
point in
want to.
time, but I don't want to do it right now
Aren't
because I like to get
stipulating
some
that you
building
would
built.
have to. No, it was just if and when you ever did.
Right.
It would need to be something that complies with the
That
sign.
wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, that's fine. Appreciate it.
Okay?
We'll just make a note. Kyle Holtz of Bernie. Jim, you have anything?
No, sir.
Cynthia?
So we're not gonna add anything, we're just
It,
gonna.
it's up to you guys,
Yeah, I
whether
think-
you want to amend it to include that or
He's
not,
gonna
but,
have to come back and tell us what kind of sign they wanna put up, when it's time.
yeah.
So
The-
let's just forget about it
But,
right now.
but the intent was not that he'd have to do it right away, it's just when and if he ever did, it would need to be a multi-tenant sign, and that's what he said he was gonna do anyway.
Yeah,
So it's just a,
let's not make it more difficult than we
Yeah.
need to.
Paul? No. Bert, anything else?
No, I think Councilmember Blue just had some good advice for the builder.
I
It was
was
a
trying to
good
make
thought.
it mandatory, just to
No,
make it
I
as
know.
a
He never
recommendation.
said
That
to
was
make,
not the
he never
intent.
said to make it mandatory. So at this time, we're not gonna add the amendment, just keep the
The site
discussion
plan,
and
the
action is
building
good.
design,
That's
the
good.
exterior
Alex,
work.
anything else?
No, sir. Thank
Jim, you're good? Cynthia, Paul? Okay. No further discussion on this, then an aye vote is to approve the conceptual design plan. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Congratulations. Okay, next up, we have item 10, discussion of and action on an ordinance of the city council to approve a Chapter 380 agreement, an annexation agreement between the city and LNF-1 LLC for the purpose of setting forth the terms and obligations between the city and developer with respect to development and annexation of approximately 57.531 acres of real property. And again, this is item number 10. So I would ask for a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item 10.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we discuss and take action on item number 10.
Okay, we have a motion from Meadows. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. Jim, it's your motion, so you're first up.
My only comment is one that I made at the last meeting, is I think it's the quality work that's going on out there, we'd like to see replicated, and so this is something that would work well within the city.
Okay, and I forget whether it's mentioned in here when I read it, but this is identical to the first one we did, so the only thing that's changed is some of the numbers.
Right.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Paul?
The only thing I had was, on page 2 of the agreement, down at the bottom, it says, I guess, it talks about the parties and to negotiate in good faith to either increase or decrease the amount in accordance with the project as built. Is this 3.3 million, is that set in stone?
No.
Or this is a good faith estimate as of right now, and this can change depending on,
Yeah, there are a lot of variables, and that's pretty much described on this one chart in the back. That
yeah,
that
that's what I
says,
was kind of thinking.
says the approximated reimbursement. First of all, it makes assumptions on the average home price, the percentage they're going to increase year to year. We're assuming a 4% increase after the fifth year, and the tax rate by the Bear Appraisal District. So it's all assumptions as stated on here, and it'll vary depending upon the actual assessed values of the
I
property.
saw that, I just,
Yeah. So that,
this
you
is
gotta
not set
start
in stone.
somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. It was just a good faith estimate. That's
pretty
what that
much,
was.
pretty much.
And that's done to determine a maximum grant amount. So we're reimbursing them theoretically for 25% of their construction costs for the development of the site.
Okay. That's all I had, thanks.
Okay, Cynthia?
I don't have anything,
Nothing?
no.
Bert?
Just like to say that, in the way our legislature has gone ahead and made almost, in my mind, impossible to annex for cities like us, that this is something that we had to do in order to get the annexation done. So, I think we're doing the right thing.
Alex?
I agree with Member Baez and the others. I'm in agreement. Thank you.
Well, and it is nice because of the additional homes that are coming in here, because if you recall, the first one we did had about, 548 homes finished, and then this one's gonna be 370, so it's gonna give us in 5 to 7 years a good tax base for that property tax out there.
It'll
Okay.
also be the largest subdivision in Helotes.
Do what?
It'll be the largest subdivision in Helotes.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Really? Bigger than Iron Horse?
Well, all the houses are very close together.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 900 homes. I'd have to look Iron Horse Canyon. I don't know how many homes are in that neighborhood. but
Probably not more than 300 or 400.
yeah, probably not.
Because y'all are what? 200 and something
200 homes, 220 lots.
in Los Reyes? And Iron Horses, they have those clustered houses down in the front, but then the estates in the back, so it averages out. Okay, so an aye vote will be to approve item number 10. So we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us to number 11, discussion of an action on an ordinance by the City Council of City of Helotes, providing for an extension of the city limits and annexing the first parcel. And Selena's put that up on the screen. And this is a 27.502 acre tract of land, as previously described in the public hearing and is described in the ordinance in your packet. And by approving the ordinance to annex this particular parcel, we're also including in the motion the approval of the municipal service plan for this same parcel of 27.502 acres. So the ordinance and the municipal service plan are done in one motion. And second, so I would ask for a motion and a second to discuss and take action.
Mayor, I make a motion to discuss and take action on 11.
Motion from Baez, do we have a second?
Seconded.
Second from Blue. Okay, Bert, you're up. Any comments?
I'm glad it's happening.
Alex?
I agree. I want to also just clarify that we are eventually later going to see zoning and such.
Yeah, it's
Because once we annex, then we'll eventually have to go through the whole process of the zoning,
Sure.
which is obvious, but still, we'll still have to go through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim?
No, sir.
Cynthia?
Nothing.
No, sir.
Okay, no other discussion being needed. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving item 11, the annexation of the first parcel of 27.502 acres, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Takes us to item 12, which is basically the same action as we just did, but this is for the second parcel that Celino put up there of 30.029 acres. And so we'll look at a motion in a second to take action. And again, this will be the municipal service plan included, just like in item number 11.
Mayor, I move that we go discussion and action on item number 12.
Motion from Meadows, a second.
I'll second that.
From Blue, a second. So we have a motion from Meadows, a second from Blue. Jim, any discussion?
Just repeat my previous comments. I think
Okay, Alex,
Nothing further. Thank
Bert,
you. No.
Paul,
No, sir.
Cynthia? Okay, no further discussion being required. We'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
If I may, Mayor, on this, just for future reference,
It's after,
you may see within your packet under item
yeah, under Exhibit A
of which
of
tab?
item number 10.
Just so council's not caught off guard.
Yeah.
This page right here,
Yeah.
the middle section, which is the 34.35 acre tract of land, you can see that they're trying to purchase that. So that would be an additional future annexation should the developer actually purchase that property, and they're working on it right now.
And that's unit which?
It's under
Yeah, it's,
10.
it's under 10. I was gonna mention that, but I know at one point they said it was very difficult negotiation, and now one of the principals is no longer with us, so I wasn't sure how that was proceeding.
What else would you do?
Has Fred mentioned anything?
They're still trying. I'm just bringing it up just so that council knows that in the future you may get another annexation
Okay,
petition
yeah.
for that.
So this one,
Yes.
Okay, we'll go back to number 4, since we suspended the rules, and move that to the end of the agenda. As y'all may or may not be aware, the planning and zoning was unable to take any action. They postponed this item in its entirety again. I would like to say that Greg Michaud called me today, voicing his frustration. Did you watch any of the video? Yep. Selena had sent. If not, we can show a few minutes of it here, of the tail end of it. But I was a little disappointed in some of the comments that were made. Some of the members of the Planning and Zoning Committee or Commission evidently are taking this a little personally. And Greg and I talked about that at some length. And he showed his frustration last night, and I think you can read it in his notes here, that he was really trying to get them to take some action and was unable to do that. So we'll go ahead and open this up for discussion with a motion, but we do have some ideas that we'd like to toss at you on this as we get into it. But I did want to let you know that Greg called me, and he's pretty committed to trying to get some action out of them at their next meeting. But anyway, if we can have some, a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this, that would be great.
Mayor, I make a motion to discuss, take action on 4.
We have a motion from Buys. We have a second.
I'll second.
Second from Massey. And I've got a couple of options. I can wait and let you guys do your discussion and then pitch that in, or I can toss it to you now so you'll be able to consider it in your discussion.
Well, my only comment is, I'm almost positive our city attorney told us that we couldn't move forward on this until P&Z made a decision.
That's true, last time, and that's true on the zoning part of it. But we can, and we Rick and I had talked about it, and then we asked Frank again, and Frank...
So you have talked to the attorney again?
Oh, yeah, and Frank did agree with us that the recommendation from planning and zoning is only required for the zoning part of it, and that you guys can, if you so choose, to, through an amended motion, go ahead and take action on the part that is applicable to Chapter 34 and 66, the lighting and the environmental part. And by doing that, you would just amend and say you would approve the ordinance by striking out, through the amendment, striking out anything that pertains to the zoning. That way you can take action and approve the change in the authority on Chapters 34 and 66 tonight. And then we can wait for them to make a recommendation on the zoning part of it and then take that action at a later date. Or you can, as you did last time, postpone the whole thing. My thoughts are, just as a matter of course, and to let the Planning and Zoning Commission know that you're serious about this, if you so choose, is to go ahead and take that action, and then that leaves them with just a decision to make a recommendation on relinquishing their approval authority on the zoning part, and then we can take action on that after they do that recommendation. If you have any questions on that, let me know. And so we had the motion from Buys. Bert, you want to start off with anything there?
Well, I guess we can approve the man other than the zoning, but why, I don't understand why they're dragging their feet. I mean,
I don't either, and I was.
they've had 2 meetings to make a decision. Have they had a quorum at both? I mean, I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I was a little disappointed, and Alex will address it. Alex and I had a nice conversation too, and I'm hoping that he did, to me, a very good job on the video explaining it. I was a little disappointed when words, especially from Jeff Wade, that the council was trying to steamroll this thing. And I was a little surprised when he said that they didn't have enough time to review it. He said they only had 4 days. And Greg tried to tell him it was the same thing that they had the previous meeting, and Wade argued a little bit, said no, they only had 4 days, but what they had Tuesday was the identical package that they had the previous month. So what that tells me is not only did they not look at it the previous month, they didn't look at it the 30 days between those 2 meetings. So
Well, also, they've been informed, I've been told they've been informed that our city attorney has told them that we are the only city that does it this way right now of the cities that he represents. So they've been informed of that, right?
I believe the email was in their packet, but I'm not sure. Rick, they knew that, right?
Yeah, everything is.
Yeah.
And I told them that in my comments
Yeah.
at the beginning of that article.
Did you?
I told them that the city attorney had identified that not just those he represented, but the entire area, no other planning and zoning
Yeah.
had final authority. for
Let
these.
me let Bert finish, and then Cynthia.
That's all I
And then
had,
we get
Rick.
back. That's all you had? Cynthia, you have anything?
I'm against doing this piecemeal. I had been thinking that we could just let them keep the sign. The zoning, to me, is the most important thing, for us to know what the developments are that are coming out here. I don't understand, why they think that we're taking power from them. The power, it's not power, it's authority. And again, we've talked about this. I'm not, at this point, I would just want all of it now, if this is the way that they're gonna act. But, I was willing to give them the environment and the signs and just have the authority over the zoning. But I just think it's sending a wrong message if we just do it piecemeal and say, okay, well, we'll take the signs and then leave the zoning. It'll make them, I don't know, maybe because they're just gonna give a recommendation and we can go against what their recommendation is, correct?
Not 100% sure at this point.
I mean, if they say,
Yes.
no, well, you can't have it, and if they unanimously say, no, we don't want the city council to have final approval, we can override that, can we not?
I would assume so.
Yeah, anyway, I just.
You can, but there is a provision that it would then take 4 out of the 5 of council to do that.
Supermajority.
Yes.
Okay.
But we still need, oh, sorry.
So anyway, I would, my drive is just let them, to just let it go and not vote for just part of it. Like I said, I'm willing to let them, do the signs, and I'm not even sure what environment means. What exactly can you?
The lighting.
The lighting.
The exterior lighting.
Yeah, those 2 things don't, I think that they're quite capable of doing that, but, again, I just don't want to do it piecemeal. I don't know, I just don't like that idea.
Jim? Oh, I'm sorry. If you can't, let's let Alex do his input.
Well, thank you. I'm torn on this one because at some point in time, I'm trying to avoid the matter of principle versus allowing that. Because, one, I think that while it might be our authority to do it, if indeed, and there are some hard feelings with regard to it, I don't think anything will get any better by us saying, well, just because we can, we're going to. The question I would have is there any sense of urgency of something coming up between now and the next meeting that would force us to want to have that authority now versus waiting 1 month? I have a tendency to agree with Councilmember Massey and give them the chance to actually make their formal recommendation. And then if they choose not to again, which would surprise me honestly, then we can move forward with that. I do think that Chairman Michelle was trying to encourage them, and in my comments to them, I also tried to encourage them, if you don't think as a package you can make a vote yourself with recommendation on everything, split it up. Give yourself a chance to vote for one thing and not for another, et cetera, at their level. Now, at our level, I don't think that's the case. I think we can make that one single vote. But at their level, if they had some heartburn with one part of it and didn't feel comfortable with the whole package because of one piece, split it up, make a recommendation, just do it. And they, in the end, they just chose to delay it. Some of their argument was that they had a very low amount of participation at that first meeting. And at that meeting, I was not present. I had car trouble and missed the meeting. We're probably one of only a few in many, many years. And at this one, they started a few minutes late because they require 5 in their quorum, and number 5 showed up barely a few minutes after 7 to take action. I would concur with Councilmember Massey that I would prefer to give them one more opportunity to make their action, and then with or without their recommendation, then move forward. But I could go either way with it.
Jim?
I'm the new kid on the block, so pardon me if I'm not trying to step on any toes of theirs. But it seems to me that classically in most other cities, that they're an advisory body and that they're not a body that's elected by, obviously, by the public. And I think it's the elected officials that have the ultimate responsibility for all of those areas to actually impose that upon citizens in that municipality or in that entity. I don't have a problem, and I don't see it becoming more cumbersome. To me, everything other than a contentious matter can be on a consent agenda. You could have 17 sign issues on a consent agenda and approve them. If there was one that had to be pulled off because there was a problem with that one, it could be pulled out. Same thing with lighting or the environment. But zoning, I agree with Cynthia, is the most important, is the most critical of the issue. And I don't quite understand, I guess rhetorically, I don't understand why this particular body has not been doing this all along. And I would like to see it corrected because we are growing. And 10 years from now, when none of us are possibly here, except for the mayor, basically that we don't want to impose problems on a 50,000 person city that are now with an 8,000 person city. And that's my feelings on it. So I would prefer that we give them another month, but I would like to get some reading from the attorney as to when it becomes a filibuster, as far as that becoming an issue. But giving them one more month, I think rather than piecemealing it, I would support.
Okay. Paul?
I think P&Z does perform a good function for us. I mean, they do dive deep into some of these things and in signage and stuff, and I know with staff support they do good work. But I do think that, I guess it sounded from the video that some people were taking this a little personal. But I'm fine postponing it if that's what we want to do, instead of doing it piecemeal. I'm okay with, and I'm again with Councilman Massey. I'm okay with leaving some signage and lighting with them. I'm just don't like doing with signings all that much, but I'm worn out on signs. So I think they do a good job there, but I guess we do need the final say in how the city's going to look 10 years down the line. So I'm still a little bit on the fence on this. I could go either way, and I see both sides. I think maybe the ultimate authority does need to rest with city council, though, is where I'm leaning.
Okay. Just a couple of things to address an answer that we got from Frank. He says there's no limit on how many times the P and Z can postpone before they make a final report to the city council. And I didn't confirm, but I remember reading in Robert's rules, and they're supposed to comply with Robert's rules, that there's a maximum of 2 times you can postpone to be in compliance with Robert's rules. So we're going to confirm that to be sure. But it just comes to a point. As far as chapters 34 and 66, I just want to be clear that you do not need a recommendation of any kind from planning and zoning to take action on those 2 sections. It's only that pertains to the zoning. And I believe it's important, although it sounds like some of you may not agree. I believe city council should have the final say, whether it's signs, whether it's lighting, whether it's zoning. I have served on many committees for the city. I've served on many committees for Alamo Area Council of Governments, and all of those committees were advisory only. We had our own agendas. We discussed the items, and then we made recommendations to the full board, and then the full board made the decisions. I've never been on a committee where the committee had the authority to make the final decision, so it's pretty unusual. And I want to remind you, too, that as you've talked about tonight, according to our city attorney, we're the only city that he deals with and that he's familiar with that gives the planning and zoning any authority over those other areas. So I think we're still very unusual, and like it or not, I really feel strongly that it should be the elected officials, and but that's totally up to you. So again, you can postpone it, you can take action, you can amend the motion and strike out anything that has to do with zoning and approve chapters 34 and 66 tonight, and that's really about the only options then. So you made the motion, so it'll be up to you whether you want to amend and go for it and see how the vote goes to approve 34 and 66, or go ahead and postpone it.
I'd just like to say also, and I think we probably all know this, that a general law city does not have to have a P&Z commission. It's not mandatory.
Correct.
That's correct, right? And then I guess my other question is to our city administrator, do we have anything pressing that we need to do this at this time?
No, it's just getting it done, just a little housework.
But I mean,
In the next 30 days, you mean?
yes.
Yeah.
When you're talking about commercial projects.
Yes.
There's nothing
Between
significant.
now and August, what is it, 7th?
The commercial project would be the zoning, but as signs and lighting, I don't know what's really coming up. At this point, there's
Is there
nothing
anything
critical.
pressing
No.
before the next P&Z meeting that you know of?
No, because it's gonna get done either at y'all's level or P and Z, so I mean, there's not.
Okay. I think I'd like to postpone it and give P&Z one more chance. I'd like to amend my motion.
To postpone?
Yes, sir.
To our next meeting, which
Yes.
will be
The 26th,
the 25th.
25th of July?
Yeah, July 25th.
I'm sorry, August.
You're saying the
Is it
meeting
August
after
9th?
Then it has to wait until
The
after.
next
the-
meeting.
The
After
meeting
the
after the P&Z meeting, I'm sorry, not the next meeting.
Which would be,
But
oh
you
yeah,
need-
you're right.
He
Yeah.
needs a second on that, right? And I'm not gonna give him a second at this point.
You're not gonna give a second?
No, because I want to talk about this a little bit more. I'm really, and I'm trying to be, I guess, nice, saying, I'll give him the signs. But something that the mayor said, he's right. I mean, and maybe if we do go ahead and vote, if we can vote on the environment and these signs, those 2 chapters, and take that authority now, that's gonna let them understand we mean business and we're gonna take those, and all they have to do is discuss the zoning part. And they can either say, no, we don't want them to have it, or yes, or they will. And then it'll still come back to us, and we can make the decision that we need to make, that we want to make. So, maybe I want to play a little hardball with them. So I'm not willing to postpone it. After all, I'd like to go ahead and take the authority for chapter 34 and signs.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly how I felt. Because as I told Greg this afternoon, they're really not in a negotiating position. It's either a take it or leave it as far as I'm concerned, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Bert, you have any comment on that? And then
I'd like
we'll-
to hear what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, we will,
No,
but it was your motion.
I'm
so
still-
We haven't accepted the motion, so you can withdraw it.
Okay, well, I don't feel like Councilmember Massey, I'd rather postpone it, so I guess what I need to do, withdraw?
Withdraw for now, and you can always remake it.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's withdrawing, because it hasn't been accepted. Alex?
Well, there's two topics. One, whether we take action now or delay it. The second is whether we're discussing of the three different sections, and I think whether or not we believe that can rest with planning and zoning, or whether it should come up to council. I think we're all it seems to be in agreement that the zoning, which is really site plans and all that, should come to council, and I completely agree. The question with regard to signage and lighting are the other two portions, which obviously we can either do now or wait till later. And having served on planning and zoning and knowing many of them for many years before coming to council, I understand a little bit of their feeling like, hey, wait a minute, we had this and now it's being taken away. Just because others don't have it it's a different feeling when you did have it and then have it taken away from you in that sense. But my concern is that the signage and the lighting is critical to how the city ends up developing and looking. And we have something that maybe many other cities don't have in the creative sign ordinance of Old Town. And that allows for quite a lot of flexibility in what a sign looks like in Old Town. It's not as if they are following strict regulations as in the rest of the city. And so rather than carve out Old Town signs separate from the rest of the city signs, I go back and forth on it as I think about it, but sometimes I'm leaning towards having that come here as well, along with the lighting. And because it does make a big difference on how the future development looks. You can't undo a sign that gets put up and then becomes grandfathered. As we've learned many times, that we can't undo it. And so with regard to the three, at this point, I'm leaning that we should retain that at the council level. I think it's easily understood that it's common practice, but it also is an elected official position as opposed to an appointed, even though they are a government body, not necessarily the same as an appointed ad hoc committee. I still think that we're going that way. Regarding waiting a month to do so, I think that we have enough trouble finding people to volunteer for the city and allowing them, and they do serve a function by providing additional insight, and they have a varied background, just like this council does. And the more input we can get before it comes to a final vote, I think is beneficial. We don't get much from our citizens, so if we could get another 6, 7, 8 of them, whatever they happen to do, gives us a little bit more diversified input before the final vote is in there. And I hesitate to say this, but I'm concerned that if we do put our foot down and play hardball, we might lose some volunteers in that regard, and therefore lose input into the potential future of the way the city looks. And so I'm still in favor of, let's give them a chance to own up to their responsibility and do the right thing. And I think Chairman Michelle will convey that very well. Because I think if we make a principle out of it, force them into something and say, we don't really care what you think, well, then we're narrowing the scope of what we're asking volunteers to do. We still probably ought to have the authority here. I don't think we need to be in your face about it with them. And I think waiting one more month, I think it's probably the right thing to do long-term. I know we'll agree to disagree with it, but I don't see the harm in waiting a month and in giving them the chance and just letting them know, this is your responsibility. But I don't want to push them out the door either. Thank you.
Jim?
Couple of things. I've sat on a couple of P and Zs, and they are a recommending body in almost every case, and not a dispositive body as far as making changes. But they do offer a big value. Earlier, the discussion was that they get into things that we might not get into. Their deep dive into things is a valued principle that we need. And they can go through a whole meeting on a very small issue, whereas we might spend a half an hour on it. I also know that we're inviting ourselves potentially for longer meetings. When we're adding more things to it, that's half in jest, but it will be an obvious result. Doing the right thing is not necessarily saying that they're doing the wrong thing, or that what they've done is not valued, or it's not being said right. I think ultimately that the final authority needs to rest with the elected officials. I think that I favor another month. I would not favor another 3 months. And I think giving them time to, for lack of a better term, to cool off and say, we understand that maybe this really should rest with final counsel, and it doesn't diminish anything that they're doing to sit down and say they're making this recommendation, and then 90% of the time, council's gonna go along with them, and 10% they're not, whatever. What did he say? I'm making those numbers up, but whatever he said in the presentation. But the idea is, the final authority for, as we become a larger municipality, needs to rest with city council. And I think we need to go in that direction. I would not favor splitting the things up, because I think down the road, you could be opening a door for someone saying, let's reverse the policy on signs, but not on zoning. I think they are a package, and I think they belong in one package as far as the end result, is my personal feeling.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Paul?
I guess I agree with kind of what Alex says, and I'm okay with holding off for now.
Okay, again, just to be clear, it doesn't matter what they recommend on
Right.
34 and 66. The only thing that you're waiting on them for is the zoning. So if you're clear on that and want to postpone the whole thing, then that's your prerogative,
Mayor,
of
may I-
course.
is it my turn yet, or is Bert, is it my, can I say
It
something?
would be him,
Th-
but he wanted to wait for everybody else, so go ahead.
I have people are concerned, first of all, I've been on the council for 10 years, and I have always listened, and I was the liaison for P and Z for a couple of years, and I was always impressed by the way that they mulled over things and talked about things to death almost. It's like, okay, let's make a decision. And there's people who have been there a long time, and some who are, a little bit newer, but most of them have been there quite a while. And so I do value their opinion and their advice. And like I said, in the 10 years, I think I've only overridden them or voted against what they recommended maybe 3 times. So I still plan to do that. I still plan to use them in that advisory capacity. So to me, nothing of that is going to change. This thing about worrying that we might lose some people, well, guess what? You guys threw Bert and I off the EDC. I wonder, do we still have an EDC? And are there new people? We got new people on there. One of them is now on the city council. So maybe if somebody is so upset on P&Z that they don't want to give away this responsibility to us, and they quit, well, you know what? There are other people. We need new people to come on here. I'm not saying I want them to leave, but I'm saying someone will always step up. So I'm not worried about that. Let's all be grown-ups here. I didn't like being thrown off at the EDC, but I was. And here we are, okay? So let's just be grown-ups and not worry about hurt feelings. And I still think we should vote, but.
And one other thing, Alex, you mentioned we can't find volunteers, and I've said it's difficult, but it's because we just really don't reach out. We've had 2 vacancies on the EDC for quite some time, Jim's vacancy and Carl Hill's vacancy, and I found two citizens to step up and fill those 2 vacancies just this week. and they'll go to the EDC board for review next Wednesday, and then they'll come to us the next meeting. So they are out there, and they are willing to serve. We just have to find them and ask. Okay, Bert?
Okay, well, the attorney has told us that we can go ahead and act on everything but the zoning, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, do I need to make a motion to,
Since it was your original motion, you have first choice to make an amended motion. Anyone can amend a motion.
okay, let's amend the motion. I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and see if have I got a second yet? I have to get a second after the amended motion, right? I say that we go ahead, that I make the motion that we approve, what is it, 32 and?
Chapter 34 and 66.
Yes, those two, and everything else other than the zoning.
So the amendment would be to strike anything concerning zoning
Yes.
out of the proposed ordinance, but approve chapters 34 and 66.
That's my motion.
Okay. Do we have a second to that amended motion?
I'll second that.
We have a second, so we have a motion an amendment by Buys and a second by Massey. So we can discuss then the amendment. Bert, you have anything else you want to say to it? Cynthia, anything else?
They will be notified that they still have to act on the zoning
Zoning.
issue. Okay,
Correct.
that's all.
Alex?
I'm
We're talking
still-
about the
I-
amendment
I
to the
know.
original motion.
Well, the amendment, basically, this would be
Approving 34 and
approve
66
two
and
and-
striking the
and-
zoning.
and not include the third.
And that's based upon not needing their recommendation for either one of those.
No, I get all of that. I think since it's probably gonna come, as much as I've said many things, saying we should allow them the opportunity to fulfill their function, which is what this really is all about. I know it may not be required, but it is something. But I think in the end, it's very clear that this council is gonna retain all the authority anyhow. And while I'm not making my comments earlier solely because I think we'll lose one or two, I think we should lose one or two, but hope they don't watch this. But that's a separate issue. I guess I'll go in favor of taking the action now on the two items that we can, because I think it's gonna be eventual anyway. I don't see it's necessary, but I think even because it's obvious to some that's extremely important, I'm gonna go ahead and go that route.
Okay, and again, and I'm sorry that the original agenda request isn't in here because we did compliment them on their service and the way they've done everything. But their function will be to advise and recommend. They'll still look at everything just like they have, and they'll recommend, as they always have. They just won't have that final authority in some situations. Jim, anything to the amendment?
Yes, sir. I'm going to reluctantly vote for the amendment. When I say reluctantly, I did that once on the EDC, but I don't agree with it. But one of the things I lobbied on when I was running for office was, I think wherever possible, we ought to have a consensus vote on council wherever possible. My inclination would be to vote no. My actual vote's going to be to vote yes, because I think it's important that we send a unified signal to whomever's listening or watching. So I have reservations, but I'll favor the amendment.
You have reservations against approving 34 and 66?
I have reservations of splitting it into two
Okay,
versus
very
leaving
good.
it for another month.
Paul?
I'm still in favor of motion, of postponing, but I am in favor of the changes.
One more round. Bert, anything to add? Cynthia, anything? Alex?
No, sir.
Jim? Paul? Okay, no other discussion. Then the amendment to the original motion is to strike anything in the proposed amendment concerning zoning, and thereby approving the ordinance to change the approval authority to council on chapters 34 and 66. Okay, so aye vote will be to approve that amendment. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. We have a 5-0 vote on the amended motion. That passes. And then that's on chapters 34 and 66, approving those. I think before we finish this up, we need to go ahead and take action on the zoning part of it, and that would be to go ahead and postpone the zoning for the time after, what's the date? The 9th?
They meet on the 7th, and we would meet on the 9th,
Okay.
August 7th.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we postpone the zoning portion of the original resolution to the 9th, till after their meeting on the 9th.
Okay. Yeah, we can do it that way. So we have a motion to postpone the zoning part of this until August 9th.
August the 9th.
Do we have a second?
I'll
Second, okay.
Alex got the second. So we have a motion from Meadows and a second from Blue. And this should work rather than making an amendment to the original motion. But all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. So the zoning portion of this item is postponed until August 9th after the planning and zoning meeting. Well, congratulations. I think that was well thought out action, and we appreciate your input and everything on that. Okay, that takes us to the end of our agenda. If there are no objections, I will adjourn the meeting. Do we have any objections? Objections going once? Okay. We are adjourned at 9:10.